Hello, good morning. It is, I almost said March, but it's April, isn't it? It's April 7th, 2022. Thank goodness for the calendar on my laptop, or I would have no idea where I am or what I'm doing. And we've got the Ask Me Anything happening here that we do every Thursday. Members submit questions, other members upvote them, and the most popular ones get answered live each week. So here we go. We'll kick it right off. Some pretty straightforward stuff this week. The first one is from Eric CM. Are there any quote unquote forbidden, what a great word, forbidden movements that you intentionally don't program together because when combined they may compromise the athlete's safety? And he said, for example, in his own experience, box jumps after handstand push-ups may leave the athlete dizzy, etc., etc. I thought long and hard about this question, and I think I'm left with the answer being not really. I really struggle to think of, like you say, any forbidden movements that I don't intentionally program together. Even your example of box jumps and handstand push-ups, I feel that's probably athlete specific. I wouldn't have any drama programming that combination together because I don't think it would affect most people. It affects some people. It's just like when we put in GHD sit-ups, there's a large segment of the population that have no drama with that whatsoever, and there's another segment of the population that report getting terribly dizzy, but that doesn't affect everybody. And so it's just kind of one of those things. So no, nothing really jumps into my head, but I also think that's because we don't really do any corny stuff, you know? We do the tried and true stuff that works, and it works over and over and over again, and that's probably why it's not really a concern. There are some things that, while they are worthwhile movements, you don't really see them in a workout because generally speaking, in a workout, we're trying to do things in some sort of an expeditious fashion, shall we say. The clock's running, you're trying to, you know, push yourself a little bit, doing it for time, and some movements are better served for time or not for time, so to speak. So that's, for example, a Turkish get-up. I don't really want to see fast Turkish get-ups. Somebody just really trying to just blitz Turkish get-ups. And that's why we overwhelmingly program those in the optional accessory work. Because they're great movements, they're useful, wonderful movements, but I don't really feel that their place is in a mixed modality workout of the day when the clock is running. They've got a great place in the optional accessory work. And that's also a movement, you could get for the general population into an area that I would not want to get and be like, all right, today's workout is a 7x1 Turkish get-up. We're just going to see how heavy can you go. Okay, there are probably some folks out there that could do that and do that well, but I would think more people would overextend themselves and then wind up in some horrific failed lift in which you can't really get out of the way effectively, and then you have a very heavy kettlebell coming straight down onto you. So that's a movement that is not done as heavy as you can for most people and works really well in accessory work when you've got all the time in the world compared to for time. Another example of things that we just don't put into workouts would be something like things that we do regularly in the warm-up, the hip and back extension. Now, there needs to be some clarity here because I was actually speaking earlier in the week with somebody who's been doing CrossFit for a really long time. And when I said the word hip and back extension, they thought I was talking about two different movements, a hip extension and a back extension. And that's not what I'm talking about. There is a singular movement whose name is the hip and back extension. There is also a separate movement called the hip extension. There is a separate movement called the back extension. But there is a singular movement that we program regularly in our warm-ups, and that singular movement's name is the hip and back extension. And that movement And if you're on, there's a video. There's always a video attached to that. So if this is shocking news to anybody, please watch that video. And then you could go watch one on the hip extension, and then you could watch one on the back extension, and you could see the difference between all three movements. Well, the hip and back extension takes both the hip and the spine through both flexion and extension under no load on the GHD. And it is a movement that is intended to be done slow and controlled. And it is a fantastic movement. And that's why we do it, at least a couple of times a week. It is awesome. And I give that movement a lot of credit for just long-term spine strength and health. And that's what we're looking for here at Linchpin. I want you working out for decades. Well, that's a movement that is done exactly as I said, slow and controlled. So that's not a movement that I would traditionally put into a workout that's 3 rounds for time, this, and some hip and back extensions, because I don't want anybody doing that movement fast. It's just not what it's intended for. Now, if somebody's head is spinning right now and they're like, okay, I gotta Google those things. I was confused. I didn't know that was a distinct movement. Well, what about in the filthy 50s? It's 50 back extensions. And this is what we used to always say, and we say it to this day, and I say it in the videos when the filthy 50s comes up. So the filthy 50s, this is going to get confusing, I'm sorry. The filthy 50s has 50 back extensions programmed. However, again, if you go into YouTube and type in back extensions for CrossFit, you'll get a video demonstration. And a back extension has the athlete's hips trapped on the pad of the GHD, and the athlete both flexes and extends their spine when doing a back extension. So, even though it says back extensions in the filthy 50s, we don't actually want you to do back extensions. We want you to do hip extensions, which is why when we post videos and talk about it in the video that we always put out with the workout of the day on the private track, we'll say, yes, we know that it says back extensions, but do hip extensions. Because on hip extensions on the GHD, the athlete's hip is not trapped by the pad. It is free of the pad so that it can articulate, it can open and close. The athlete flexes and extends or open and closes their hip only, and their spinal column does not flex or extend. It stays rigid. So in a movement that's done for time, hopefully everyone's following the bouncing ball on this. It might be hard to imagine. If you're doing something for time, I would want you to do the hip extension, because you're not whipping your spinal column from flexion to extension. Your spinal column is locked, and all you're doing is opening and closing your hip on that GHD machine. Your spinal column stays rigid. It is unwavering. If you actually did back extensions, well, then your hip would be trapped on the pad, and you would be, since it's for time probably, trying to just whip your spinal column from flexion to extension 50 times as fast as you could to get a good time in the filthy 50s. So that is why we do not do back extensions on the filthy 50s. We do hip extensions, even though it says back extensions in the description. I'm sorry, I know that's so confusing. That's just an oddball workout where that kind of happens like that. But getting back to the original question, hip and back extensions is also something where you're taking not only your hip, but also your back through both flexion and extension. And that's why we don't do them for time. We do them in the warm-up. So, Eric, hopefully that helped. Okay, next question from Patrick S. And as I always say, not me, a different Patrick S., who also lives in Washington. So that's confusing. Okay. He says, let's see, let me extend the question. I enjoy it when sprint days, 50-meter, 100-meter, 200-meter dashes come up, but I personally find myself having trouble trying to get to that top-end all-out gear, as we say, like the devil is chasing you, even though I do push myself hard. So here's my question. Is there any value to sprints, even if they're not completely all out? Or would it be more beneficial on days like that to do the assault bike or rower instead? fantastic question. And what's funny, it's not to steal all the thunder here, but Adrian Bosman and I literally just did an entire Varied Not Random podcast on this very topic. So if you want to hear this topic covered over the course of 30 minutes, you can dive into that episode. And that was Varied Not Random episode 51, which is entitled Sprint Without Pulling a Hamstring. So I'd highly encourage you to watch that. But I'll give you the short Reader's Digest version right here. I just dated myself. A lot of my kids certainly wouldn't know what Reader's Digest is. Anyway, so let me look at the question here. I lost my place. Okay, so here's my question. Is there any value to sprints even if they're not completely all out? Short answer, yes. Okay? So this should be encapsulated in the general consensus that sprinting doesn't cause you pain, right? Because there are some people who sprinting just causes their knees, hips, ankles, feet, whatever it happens to be, some sort of discomfort. And because of that, sprint days are better served for them on a bike or on a rower. So that's absolutely true. But let's say that you're not in that category. Your question is, I have trouble pushing myself completely all out, finding that top gear. So is there value in sprints even if they're not done at 100% effort? And so the short answer for that is yes. And here's how I would encourage you to wrap your mind around that. One of the great things about CrossFit, and as always, I'm sorry, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but it will get the point across. Variance is a wonderful thing, right? So if you think with regards to running, okay, maybe you're going to do your sprint days, but you're not going to go 100% true maximal effort on a 200-meter repeat or a 100-meter repeat. Okay, fine, no worries. But think that most of the other time that you're running in CrossFit, you're probably running as part of a multi-round mixed modality workout. You're doing Helen, 3 rounds for time, 400-meter run, some pull-ups and kettlebell swings. You're doing Nancy, 5 rounds for time, 400-meter run, some overhead squats. Something else, 3 rounds for time with some 800-meter runs, and something else, right? It's always and something else, and it's a longer bit of a deal, right? It's 3 rounds, it's 4 rounds, it's 5 rounds. So those runs that you're doing in those workouts, myself included, they're not really runs. They're jogs, right? I mean, because it's a longer time domain than if you were just doing a 200-meter dash. Nancy's going to take you 15 minutes, so it's not like a 200-meter dash. It will take somebody 30 seconds to 60 seconds, so it's significantly longer. And Helen is 9 to 13 minutes. They're all significantly longer, so because of that, the pace at which you're running or jogging is much, 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 much slower than it would be on just a dedicated sprint day. That you're doing 8 200-meter repeats, and you're going to rest 2 or 3 minutes between each, and you can hit each one really hard. So getting back to your question, is there value on doing those sprint days, even if you're not doing it at maximal effort? And yes, because of that variance word that I led with. Because let's say for simple math, and I mentioned this in that Varied Not Random podcast, if the pace, let's say that we had a radar gun that a cop would use in a speed trap, right, to see if you're speeding down the road. And he watched you go by. I'm going to use simple numbers, okay? These are not real numbers, or else we'd be beating Usain Bolt in a race. And he watched you go by with the radar gun. And the pace that you used in Helen, or the pace that you used in Nancy, or whatever it happened to be, again, these are just simple made-up numbers, was 10 miles an hour, okay? And then we saw your pace with that radar gun on just a dedicated 200-meter dash, and it was 20 miles an hour, and that was as fast as you could go. Well, that's a significant discrepancy, right? Your 100% pace is 20 miles an hour. Your workout pace is 10 miles an hour. So your workout pace is like 50% when you think about your actual top-end speed of what you're possible of. Well, you've got a lot of range between 50% and 100%. And chances are, most workouts, you're not deviating too far from that 50% effort or speed kind of a thing because you got other stuff going on in the workout. So now if you go to a dedicated sprint day, well, let's say that you never get to 100%. Let's say that you never even get to 90%. Let's say that on those days you're comfortable going about 80%. That's a huge difference compared to the 50% that your body's normally doing during the mixed modality multi-round workouts. So even if you did the 8 by 200 meter repeat day at an 80% effort compared to what your true top end is, you are exposing your body to a speed and an intensity with regards to running that it is not exposed to on any other workout, period. And so that in and of itself would lead me to believe there would be tremendous benefit for you just to do that. So even if you don't hit 100%, yeah, the answer is yes. That I think there's great value there. And there's a second part of the question. Or would it be more beneficial in those days to do the assault bike or rower instead? And again, I kind of touched on that earlier, that that's what we would largely say, like, hey, don't run today. If running hurts your knees, the bike's great, go ahead and do that. And we'll do interval days, high intensity days, sprint style days, both on foot, on the rower, and on the bike. So you will get exposure to all those things. And the only reason so we'll cover your bases, what I'm saying. The only reason I would say that somebody, anytime that a run sprint comes up, should choose one of the other options is either inclement weather or something's going on with your body that running causes you a discomfort that is not the kind that you need to endure to propel yourself forward. So that would be my question, my answer for that. Okay. Next one was about the Linchpin games. Who asked that? Where is that? Stand by. Linchpin games. Linchpin games. Oh, it's Patrick again. Had the other upvoted question. On the AMA number 86, you were asked a question about the Linchpin games that you were working on. I joined shortly thereafter and don't remember that happening. Any chance it will happen sometime soon? Unknown. Well, what it will probably, I have these ideas, and then these ideas have to be actually fleshed out into what will they look like in reality. And where that sort of manifested or led itself to, the first iteration of that anyway, was what we saw when we did the CrossFit Linchpin, the DT challenge through Beyond the Whiteboard. So it'll probably look like something like that. I've got plans that are rolling slowly, have absolutely no clue what the timeline is, so can't even give you a remote guess on that. And I don't know if that original idea of the Linchpin games may morph into something that's more community-wide, regardless of what, if you're with Linchpin or some other affiliate, just like a really cool thing that people could do. So I am working on some projects with some people that would have maybe a larger reach like that, but nothing to the point where I can say much more than that. So I'm sorry, it's probably an unsatisfying answer, but it's a truthful answer. Okay. Final most upvoted question. Rod and Diane Coachman. Now, Rod, I'm thinking that this is you. It could be your wife, since it says Rod and Diane Coachman, but I'm thinking that it's you, Rod. So hopefully you can correct me if I'm wrong. Question is regarding building an engine. Although I usually finish the workouts within the more likely time, should I consider lowering the weight and concentrate on moving faster to help increase my endurance and stamina? It's a cool question. And so I'm thinking that this might be Rod, because Rod's just a strong human being, a big, strong human being. And so maybe I'm assuming that he's saying to be actually more well-rounded, it would really benefit me to build that engine a bit more, increase my engine and endurance and stamina. Would lowering the weights and trying to go faster help do that? So good question. First and foremost, what has to happen for anything like this is an actual, like, an honest assessment of yourself. And is the endurance and stamina a true area that needs improvement? Is it really what's holding you back, or are your times actually quite well? You're not giving yourself enough credit. You are regularly doing them within the more likely time. It's fantastic. And is everything progressing nicely for you? If an honest assessment is like, yeah, but I do think this one area is something that I could focus on a bit more, and the benefit would be worth it. Great. Okay. So the other part just to remember is nothing extra is needed. Again, there's a difference between want and need. So you don't need to do anything else because just through varied programming, the engine is going to get worked, right? But if every day was something heavy that slowed you down and was just a slog, you would never give the athlete the ability to move quickly and therefore build that engine. But when you've got programming that has from just body weight movements to lightweight to moderate weight to heavyweight, you're going to have everything in there you need on plenty of days to move with a purpose, because it's not some preposterously heavy barbell that you just can't move quickly with, or you're so tired from the barbell that your runs are just like a death shuffle. So ideally, good varied program will help solve that, and you'd have dedicated sprint days like we kind of talked about with Patrick's question and things like that. And then you've got your dedicated heavy days where you're just going heavy and not worrying about anything else. So your bases should be covered there. But again, we live in a wonderful world where if you so desire to, sprinkle a little something extra in there, you can. So also, if you haven't, bear in mind that some extra engine work gets placed somewhat regularly in the optional accessory work that's included in the private track every day. I don't know if it's once a week or so. That might be kind of a fair thing to say. There's some sort of bike, run, or row sprint sort of a deal, or a longer time domain sort of a deal that will undoubtedly help with the engine right there. But getting back to your original question, if you just want to experiment with lowering the weights every now and then so that you can ramp up that intensity and just move faster throughout the workout, I don't have any drama with that at all. And I would say, let's say you're regularly doing the prescribed workout of the day, depending upon the workout, the wild card option might be really close to the workout of the day, but with a slightly reduced loading. And then, of course, you have the scaled workout every day, which the loading is most likely even more reduced there. So even just going when it makes sense and the workout lines up that way, from the prescribed to the wild card might be just that slight, maybe there's a 135-pound barbell for the gentleman on a prescribed workout of the day. The wild card probably has a 115 barbell, and the scaled probably has a 95-pound barbell. Well, on a day like that, it might be a really nice change just to choose that wild card option, grab yourself that 115 barbell instead of the 135, and that in and of itself is going to allow you to depress that accelerator even a bit more. So I think that's a great idea, a great call, and could be some wonderful variants for somebody like Rod right there. And I would say if you're looking to start to work that in, I wouldn't just suddenly do it to every workout that comes up. I would say if we're doing 5 workouts a week, one's usually a heavy day, so that leaves maybe 4 mixed modality workouts a week there. I would start maybe with just 1 to 2 times a week, mixing that up and choosing that lighter weight and allowing yourself to just go a little bit quicker. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with what that does. So, excellent question. Okay, let's do some Linchpin shoutouts. I've got 3 set aside here. The first one has an absolutely amazing name. It's entitled Burpees and Enchiladas, 2 things that you may not think would go well initially. If everybody remembers that workout we did, there was 1 up to 10 and then back down to 1 of burpees and strict pull-ups. That was a real treat, right? So it came out to be 100 of each. This is from Dermont G. So he's in the middle of this workout, and he says, I stopped to eat at round 5. Right there, you've won me over with this post. What an awesome post. I stopped to eat at round 5. Started off doing some pull-ups while waiting for my enchiladas to heat up in the microwave. I got as far as round 5, ate my food, and then picked back up where I left off. I can confirm that burpees are named correctly, so we can only assume there were some burps happening from the enchiladas. That's fantastic. I don't know why. I absolutely love that he just stopped in round 5, pulled a enchilada out of the microwave, ate it, and then just kept going and didn't worry about what his time was. Fantastic. That might win all-time best thing ever. This this I mentioned as a standalone. I gave a shout out a while ago, but I just finally am getting around to the actual screenshot that I took. So this is probably, I think, a couple months ago. This is from Bob S. Bob is 61 years old. That's what I love about Linchpin, right? We've got people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And that might confuse people at first because they're like, well, how can that be? How can the same workout of the day serve somebody in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s and 50s and 60s? With some slight modifications or scaling, the answer is that it absolutely can. Because, depending upon what you did the day before, well, you might need a workout that falls between a 9 and 13-minute time domain, doesn't go below parallel, has a bit of a light loading with some hinging at the hip, and needs an upper body pull. That's Helen. Well, that fits for a 20-year-old, and it fits for a 40-year-old, and it fits for a 60-year-old. So it works. 60-year-old might take a little bit longer than a 30-year-old, but still within the time domain, still did what their body needed to do based upon what they did the day before. Everyone's working at a relative intensity, so that workout drives both the 20-year-old's fitness forward, the 40-year-olds, and the 60-year-olds. And maybe the day after that, guess what everyone needs to do? 7x1 deadlift. That works for a 25-year-old, works for a 45-year-old, works for a 65-year-old. They all just deadlift different loadings, but it all works. And suddenly, we start to see how actual intelligently designed, well thought out program can encompass a very large segment of the population and drive fitness forward for all of those people, even though they're in various stages of life, which at first sounds confusing until you kind of understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then you start to kind of see the matrix as to why it works. So long story short, here's Bob S. at 61 years old, part of Linchpin, total animal. He says he's 10 years of CrossFit, 10 years into CrossFit, I guess, 10 years of CrossFit. The goal has always been 20 rounds of Cindy. Being that I'm ahead on the workouts, at least when he posted this, I pick and choose when I have no more program Linchpin. At 61 years old, he did Cindy. He got 20 complete rounds plus 5 pull-ups and 6 push-ups. At 61 years old, he got just over 20 rounds of a prescribed Cindy. I want that to actually sink in for a second, okay? 20 rounds of Cindy is hard wherever you are in your life. If it's 61 years old, you're still doing unassisted pull-ups. You're Conan the Barbarian compared to most of society. You're knocking out push-ups. You're getting your body below parallel on air squats, and you got just over 20 rounds of Cindy. The word stud doesn't even define Bob's performance on that. It's more impressive than anything I've seen in the last few years at the CrossFit Games. Quite frankly, that's no exaggeration, no hyperbole. That's absolutely awesome, more inspiring. That's why we do what we do. That's the goal of not just beating ourselves up every day and doing things that are going to increase our long-term health. Bob completely exemplifies that. So Bob, you're awesome. Last of the Linchpin shoutouts. This is entitled 6 to 7 months have gone by. Let's see, what's this one? This is from Casey A. So the workout of the day when she posted this was on February 8th, was sets of 3 back squat, 5 sets of 3 back squat. And she said, you all literally push me just to go into the gym and do it every day. My last 1 rep max back squat that I logged in beyond the whiteboard in August of 2021 was 120 pounds. So she got 120 pounds was her 1 rep max back squat. Today, she did her final triple at 120 pounds. So how cool is that? August of 2021, 120 is her 1 rep max. February of 2022, she does her final triple back squat at 120 pounds. Very, very cool. She says, I know I don't need to tell y'all, but this stuff works. So Casey, absolutely awesome. We're all familiar with Casey. She's a very busy, dedicated mom, so way to get it in. And that closes out the shout out. So I'll end just with this. Submit your videos. Linchpin Garage Gym Tours. On the CrossFit Linchpin YouTube channel, we have a playlist entitled Garage Gym Tours. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm getting great feedback from everyone. Loves seeing all the spaces that other people work out in. So if you remember the private track anywhere around the world, film your garage. Landscape mode would be great, holding your camera sideways. Upload that video to YouTube. Email me a link to info, that's INFO, info@crossfitlinchpin.com. I will then post that on the CrossFit Linchpin YouTube channel for the world to see. A bunch of people have sent me in. I think we've got just over 60 videos on there now from all around the world. They're awesome. I think I've got 2 or 3 more unopened sitting in my inbox that I need to get to that I'll post over the course of the next few days, but keep them coming in. They're fantastic. And other than that, keep treating each other well. Be kind to each other. Have fun. Enjoy your rest day. And I'll see you tomorrow.